What are your favorite types of non-standard monster loot? I don't know if I have any favorite types. This is posted by Rover Buff. Hey y'all. So, one of the things which I like to add to my games is quote unquote natural loot, valuable items which can be salvaged or harvested from slain monsters. The prospects of acquiring such loot has at times even made hunting down such monsters for their valuables an adventure in its own right, instead of just being a reward for randomly encountering the creature and overcoming it. BX already does this with the killer bee and its healing honey, for example. Some of my own examples include giant crab roe. Giant crabs have a 1 in 6 chance to carry roe or crab eggs. They are a well-known delicacy in refined circles, and if freshly harvested or properly brined, they could fetch a pretty penny at many a wealthy noble or mercantile household. Cockatrice wishbone, or cockatrice wishbone. Cockatrices have a wishbone much like their more common kin, the chicken, only this wishbone truly does possess magical powers and can be processed into a cure for petrification. Salamander fluid. Both frost and flame salamanders radiate forth their respective elements in such capacity that they can hurt adversaries. When slain, their inner fluids, which holds this radiating power, can be carefully harvested and processed. Once done so, they may be used in a manner of ways, from making frost or flame flasks, working like burning oil, to lightly coating one's weapon in the fluids and having them temporarily radiate frost or flame for extra damage. What about you guys? Any quote-unquote natural loot you like to tack on to your monsters? I don't think I have any. I haven't come across any. I haven't really thought about it, actually. It's a cool thing. I think fire beetles are one of the giant beetles in the BX bestiary. I think they make mention of something with is it the fire beetle? The other ones where you could potentially which parts, or maybe it's whichever ones there's ones that maybe they do light and you can take their fluids, and I think create some kind of torch out of it, or light source, not a torch, but some kind of light source out of it. It's a cool idea. I personally, I'm always wary. I'm just not a big crafting fan. And part of my wariness sometimes with some of these is that it turns the game into more of a crafting game, or puts crafting in a bigger light than I want it to. My players haven't been interested in it. If it ever came a time where they were super interested in crafting, I probably would have to do this stuff anyway, because I'm not so anti that I just would simply refuse to do it, even if everyone else wanted to. It's just kind of it's not my bag. In terms of, like, say, the giant crab roe, what I might do or emphasize here is, sure, they can fetch a pretty penny, but I might want to take that and tie it into some of the social world building that you might want to do. If you think about how your party, the individual characters, might want to gain ranks in society, well, how do you do that? You present yourself to the local lord. Great. I'm so-and-so, and I defeated the bug bladder beast of Blarg. Okay, fine. But if you can show up at that audience and say, I defeated the bug bladder beast, and here I've also brought you these delicately, perfectly brined giant crab roe. Ooh, I like the cut of your jib, sir. Tell me more. Come forward, sir, and gain this prize. So I think I might emphasize that instead of the mercantile nature. Depending on your game, the party's probably going to have lots of opportunity to get lots of gold. So adding more gold or silver, whatever, adding a coin to their pockets in terms of the payoff, and may not be there. Some of these other ones, like the salamander fluid and the cockatrice wishbone, have a payoff in different situations, but combat oriented, presumably, or at least recovery / combat, cure petrification. You're probably going to get petrified from either a trap, spell, something conflict-ish, and then the salamander fluid, you could probably use it for other things, like creating the world's first refrigerator by coating the inside of a barrel with frost salamander fluid and sticking your stuff in there, which could be kind of cool, but mostly combat. So I might look at, well, how can we use these things and have them be useful in other ways in adventuring? How might this help you in a dungeon? Like I said, there was that one beetle type. It might have been the fire beetle, something where you could take the gland out and stick a stick through it and turn it into a torch, or something like that giant crab roe, where you could think about, well, if you needed to gain entrance with someone, you want to give them an impressive gift, that's an impressive gift. Let's see what some other folks have in here. Did I upvote? I did. All right. Quietus87 points out the Hacklopedia of Beasts, which includes monster yields. In its monster yields, which parts of a monster can be sold, used for spell components, or if it's edible, and does eating it count as cannibalism? It's a good source for such ideas. I like the idea of maybe leaning into spell components, which is one of those things that most folks don't pay a whole bunch of attention to. But if you're going to go through the trouble of doing these out, then think about what spells, if you've got the innards, if you've got a cognitrice wishbone, what might you use that for? Maybe you could use it as a spell component for a petrification or some other thing. Certainly giant crab roll, you could maybe think of some things that you could use with that, or any of this stuff really. And then Dromedary Pit counters with its $40 for a PDF. That's wildly overpriced. And Quietus accepts that criticism with aplomb. Pete Giant says, if the players come up with an idea and it's logical, I lean into allowing it rather than building a system I'd work out when, if it occurs. Yes, I think the benefits to having the system in place. I agree with you, Pete Giant. I think it's great. You kill this thing and you so yeah, you want to make sure in those instances that, let's say, like I think lots of people do. I certainly do in my games. Okay, you're fighting a frost salamander, and the player, the character kills the thing, and you say, "Hey, narrate how you're killing it." Right? Narrate what you're gonna do, and they're like, "I split it down the middle from in twain from head to toe." Fair enough, right? Split it. Then you want to lean into narrating the things, talking about, because a lot of times, especially when you're dealing with magical creatures, players aren't going to assume that a frost salamander has a frost gland inside of it. Certainly, I wouldn't necessarily assume that it's a magical ability. Why do dragons breathe fire? It could just be they breathe fire. It doesn't have to be. My concept of a dragon having some kind of fire gland in its throat that does this, or it's just a magical ability of dragons that they just have, and it just comes from their being, and there is no particular gland. Neither one of those is wrong. So if I'm a player, I'm not necessarily going to assume that I can cut open monsters and find sort of quasi anatomical bits that are going to correspond to their magical abilities. And in fact, sometimes they're not going to even be there. So then it's important for me as the GM, as the ref, to then, if they do something like they cut open the belly of the salamander, whatever, that I speak somewhat to that maybe there's a particular, sort of pouchy gland sloughs out of the wound, and through a small cut, some substance that seems to be like have the consistency and color of quicksilver, but radiates cold, seeps into the ground, right? Something like that. And you go, oh, and then I think it's hard to ask your players to come up with all that, because, like I said, their conception of what makes a magical beast magical is going to be potentially different from mine. And if I don't introduce it in some way, or just have that talk, you could also do it session 0. Oh, by the way, everything that has magical powers is going to have some kind of anatomical bit that gives them that power. So if you find that bit, you could do something with it. For me, I probably wouldn't want to go that route, because I don't want it to turn into Monster Hunter the game, but that's me. And I actually have never played Monster Hunter. It actually looks cool in terms of video games. It doesn't seem to be my cup of tea when I think of it in a tabletop playing sense. Max Damage 1 says, giant spiders, crabs, praying manti, beetles, anything with a chitinous shell can be harvested with a successful dex roll and turned into armor or shields. The praying mantis head and the beetle horn are popular helmets. I do like that, but I wouldn't say a successful dex roll. I would say you have to take that back to somebody who can do it. This is where I would bring in the specialists. You do not have the expertise to cut this thing out in a way that you're not damaging it and doing whatever. You got to take it back to I guess maybe there's even somebody, the insect armorer person. Hey, cool idea for a settlement if you want to make something unique and you're in an environment where there's lots of giant insects. When you think of some armorers who are working with steel and iron, maybe bronze, why wouldn't you have somebody that works with chitin and these sort of exoskeleton pieces that it can put it together? And that's their specialty. So if you're in that part of the world, you can take something to that person. If you're not, then maybe you got to track down somebody who is. Maybe there is some little village or tribe or individual out there that can do that. And whispers of what they can do with given a giant beetle shell come on you, and hey, you just so happen to have one sitting in the back of your wagon. If only you could take your wagon across those shimmering wastes and find where the last known location of that individual used to be. That sounds
P
like
Giant
an
says, yeah, there
adventure.
has to be a cost for any item that improves the PC mechanically.
Yes, I would agree with that. So I'll give max damage. We got Logan Maddox bringing up cattle. Cattle is one of the most convenient. Well, let me go back and read the beginning. Logan Maddox says cattle. Maybe it's because I'm a big nerd who likes mythological stories, but something about a giant stole our cows, please get it back appeals to me. Cattle is one of the most convenient types of treasure. It moves itself, it's useful dead or alive, less so dead, but still pretty useful if you're quick about it. It immediately communicates to everyone roughly how rich you are. It's inconcealable, so you're always walking exposed and inviting attack, but also no one can simply bump you and run away with your ox on their back. But if they did, it'd be very funny indeed. I also really enjoy pieces of art as treasure and not always paintings. There was this time where, in a campaign taking place a bit earlier in the medieval period, pretty much still in the Dark Ages, I put a whole ass Bible there. Nothing more, it was just a copy of the Bible, but one of my players immediately sussed out that that stuff was not common, and so he took it with him. He eventually didn't want to part with it because his character was sort of a cleric, and I think that's fun treasure you can hoard. When we ran Winter's Daughter, he took the gems the lady gave them and fashioned them into earrings and started wearing his own colors. Since he was part of the clergy, he figured he should have appropriate heraldry and stuff. It was quite fun. My other players at this time were knights, so they didn't care all that much because they already had it. They did like the cavalry, though. Cattle's a good one, and it's one you don't think of. There's a lot of common things that can end up being treasure. I mean, you're probably not going to find cattle in the bottom of a tomb. So, when you have you're doing your own version of Against the Giants and going against the Hill Giant, then yeah, they might have cattle or Cyclops if you want to be even Cyclops and sheep. From the Odyssey, I think. And yeah, that stuff is good. It does speak to your wealth. I think all the things they mentioned are great. I definitely like your odd treasure items, stuff that isn't gold, stuff that the fun thing with stuff that's not coin is that it forces the party to interact with the world to turn it into coin. They've got to get it appraised somewhere. They have to sell it to someone. They have to do all these things out that force them to interact with the world, as opposed to coin, which is taking the stuff in their pocket and doesn't add in their interactions. I always think that the more you get your party interacting with the world, stuff is going to get just. They're just going to like someone sweeping their hand through water. This is going to bring up all kinds of sand, all the sediments that is sitting at the bottom. And I think of all the stuff in the world is just going to come out just as you get your party moving around. As soon as somebody appraises it, will they do a good job, a bad job? Maybe they try to steal something. Maybe they don't. And then the party then has to take that information, try to find someone to then buy this stuff who's going to be someone unusual because most folk in the world can't afford to buy this fancy urn or painting or whatever it is that was sitting down in some tomb. So now you have to try to find that nobleman, try to find some eccentric person, someone in there, a wizard in their tower, a knight in their castle that's going to buy this tapestry that we've been carting around with us, and we need to unload it because it's heavy and we're tired of walking around with this cart just because we've got this 12-foot long, or I don't know, who knows now, 30-foot long, 20-foot high tapestry. So we got to get rid of it. All kinds of interactions come up. What if the party tries to screw over the appraiser? The appraiser says, well, I'm going to do this, but I want 10% of whatever it's sold. Then the party decides not to give them those 10%, and does the appraiser find out? What if the knight says, you know what, I'll buy it, but first you need to take care of this thing for me, or tries to steal it from them? Or there's just so many opportunities as all kinds of stuff is dredged up that I think it's worthwhile putting the coinage stuff to the minimum and really looking at all kinds of grave goods and just art and just all kinds of weird stuff that's maybe valuable to someone, but then it becomes up to the party to find that someone. And then they have to make choices. Well, this thing that looks like a weird fish skeleton mounted in a human form on a thing, that's garbage. But then maybe some other players think, that's probably going to be the most. I don't know who's going to want that, but whoever does is probably going to pay a lot for it because that's really weird and odd and specific. There's attention, and that's all good stuff.